excited to have you guys with us today because we are actually hosting our first ever literary event at Vogue Singapore, and it's something that, we've been wanting to do for so long. And this is actually the first ever live edition of Vogue Dialogues as well, so it's really special to us. So for today's topic, we're actually going to be talking about building inclusive literary spaces everywhere in the world, but also in Singapore in particular. We have 4 amazing panelists who are all members of our local literary scene. So for my very first question for you guys, what do you guys personally seek out in literary spaces? And what role or function do you guys think they play in society?
Live literary spaces are really important because it's one of the few spaces left that are human speaking to human, and like emotion will fill the room, and it's such a, it's one of those rare spaces where people are still actively listening to each other, and I have not found them in any other art form except like live literary spaces. Yeah.
And the best thing about literary spaces is you can be alone and not be alone. I wish we had more of them here, which is why I'm so excited by what the both of you are doing and with your group of volunteers. But literary spaces are vital because we don't have an outlet. We all think we do because we've kind of numbed ourselves with mindless entertainment and consumption, but we're constantly consuming and we're not sharing communally. Literary spaces offer us that option.
They are a capsule collection of a curated taste of different ideas and philosophies. But with like Casual Poet Library, the joy of it honestly is the fact that it's indirect interaction, but that is offline at the same time. So there's a passing over of influences and community. CPL as a little library gives a sliver of an avenue, I think, for those kind of interactions, which is, as an introvert, it's heaven.
I think for me, literary spaces are about permission to just be. I feel like for me, life in Singapore is always about the pressure to be very productive, right? We're always going for the next goal, always moving forward, always asking people, what are you doing, right? But when I'm in Casual Poet Library, I'm actually just being. And the weird thing is that by just being and taking a step back, I'm actually weirdly more productive without because I think you need that. I think everybody, right, readers, writers, we all need that space in which to create or dream, and that's what I seek out in literary spaces.
Shubigi, I know that you've worked and lived in many places around the world and you have a very global perspective when it comes to most other topics. So I'd love to know your take. What do you think are some preconceived notions about literary spaces that we could afford to let go of?
I think the idea that literary spaces need to be polished, as in they need to be places that aren't grunge. I think it's some of the most brilliant literary spaces that have also endured far longer are very often squats, and that's I think one of the main problems here. You can't squat here in Singapore. I don't know. I just feel here the pressure is very high. There's a pressure for it to look like it belongs in a mall, or that you have to have.
It's commercially viable.
Yes, and these are just unfortunate, really sad pressures, and they're also distractions.
Yes.
Because the main work of a literary space, bookstore, they spring up around a number of things. So one is, do we have indie presses? Do we have an existing ecosystem of the whole factory, that the assembly line that's involved in the making of a book? All the way, so we talk about literary spaces supporting writers, but that's only one part of it. What happens after that? That's why I'm so excited about what Daryl and you're doing. Your new press.
After Image.
It is so exciting, and I just was asking you so much just before we started because it's the first I've heard of it, and it's really amazing. We really do need this, and I think for that to exist, it's vital that we actually try and find spaces that are, I don't hesitate to say liminal, but maybe fringe spaces.
I think fringe is everything.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think fringe is everything. I feel like when you pay attention to what is being said on the fringe, it does filter into the center, and that's how things start to germinate and shift.
I want to come to the idea of inclusivity a little bit. And I think we've already started to unpack this, but maybe more formally, we'll start with you again, Pooja. What is your idea of an inclusive literary space? And what do you think we are including when we talk about inclusive literary spaces?
I think it's very easy to talk about inclusivity practices, right? So like if you go to the festival webpage, you'll see things like, oh, like we like want to welcome people of all abilities, blah, 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 and these are the services we provide. But like I think we have to be honest about the fact that all attempts at inclusivity are works in progress, right? And sometimes the real honesty is you don't have the resources to make things as inclusive as you'd like, but there's always a way. When I took over as festival director and I said like I would really love note taking at every session, like I would really love like closed captioning, and then like they showed me the numbers and I was like, all right, we can't do that because like then we will have no money to pay speakers. So that's the reality. But then there's always a way, like so you decide, okay, why don't we just tell people to write in and say that they would like these services at these sessions so that we can allocate the resources where they're needed. But what I'm saying is that like I feel inclusivity, again, is not a blanket statement, it's a work in progress, but it's an intent.
First week of our opening, we realized we had a huge blind spot. There was somebody who needed wheelchair access, but the way that we managed to MacGyver that scenario was actually because we borrowed a ramp from the next door furniture shop, which for me is, as an anecdote, is just showing that like when you do have connections with a community, then you can tap on to those resources to borrow that very heavy ramp.
So what Izyanti said, actually that was my first shift. My first shift at Casual Poet Library. I was like 1 hour into my shift and then, you know, this lady, she was very nice, but she said, you know, I need to get in. So, and it was an exercise in community spirit because there were it was packed in that first week, you know, so I just said, because I couldn't lift the ramp myself, I was just like, can anybody help me? And then immediately, you know, had all these people go next door and, you know, with the ramp. And the lady afterwards said to me, she sent me a message and she was just like, thank you. Because it's not often, especially in Singapore, that people will make you feel seen. Right? I think we other people a lot, right? And so it was just the act of the fact that she felt seen, even if it wasn't perfect, right? She felt seen.